legs. Look at his face. An intern knows his place. Your job is to listen and follow. You know that, brat.
Boardroom, mid-morning. The regional manager smiles for the room, tilts a mug, and lets coffee slide down the intern's face. Phones hover, the chairs don't move, she doesn't flinch. She notes the time, the witnesses, the policy code on the wall. They think she's powerless. She's the black CEO's daughter on day 7 of an undercover audit. In 10 minutes, this spill will map to padded invoices, fake retreats, and mismatched signatures. In 1 hour, doors will open, badges will blink red, and the jokes will stop. Keep watching, because the cleanup starts where the laughter ends. Mid-morning light flattens the boardroom into white table, gray carpet, and a wall of glass that reflects everyone back at themselves. The regional manager stands at the head of the table with a mug in his hand. He wears the kind of smile people use when they know the room will follow along. Around him, notebooks are open, lids off pens, coffee rings on printer paper. A dozen faces turn in the same direction like chairs at a recital. The intern sits near the center, posture steady, hands folded over a thin folder and a leather briefcase. Her braids hang neat and dry. For one clean second, the room is only air and breath. He tilts the mug. A brown ribbon climbs the rim and breaks over her forehead. The liquid finds its own paths across skin and collar, and then slips into the seam of the folder. A few people gasp too late. Someone on the left raises a phone by reflex. No one moves a chair. The sound is ordinary, a soft pour and a small splash, like topping off a plant. The manager says, "Here is your gift," in a voice that expects a laugh. A weak chuckle tries to form and fails. The intern does not flinch. She watches the flow settle, blinks once to clear a sting at the corner of an eye, and reaches for a napkin from the stack near the pitcher of water. She sets the napkin on the table instead of her face. First she checks the clock at the far wall. Then the meeting is invited on the screen. Then the laminated conduct sheet pinned near the door. The camera above the screen is live. The red dot is steady. She notes 3 witnesses who looked away at the first drop and 2 who smiled. She notes who holds authority and who holds the door pass that opens every floor. She notes the manager's hand and how steady it stayed. She notes that no one offered a tissue until the pouring had stopped. The room starts to breathe again. The analyst in the third chair on the left whispers, "Are you okay?" The intern nods once, thanks her softly, and asks for a copy of the agenda slide. She opens the briefcase enough to slide the damp top sheet into a clear sleeve. The sleeve clicks shut. She places the mug down so the handle points to the right and aligns with the logo printed on the coaster. Small things matter. They matter because later someone will claim they do not remember the order of events. The small things will hold. The manager launches into the meeting, eager to restore the normal rhythm. Numbers. A new vendor with strangely round pricing. A travel line that spikes on weekends. A retreat that left no minutes and no outputs. He moves too fast across the slides. He says, "Trust me," and taps his watch. The intern asks a plain question about a receipt that lists a hotel 2 blocks from the office. The room pretends not to hear. She repeats the number on the receipt. She reads the date. She asks who approved it. It is simple arithmetic. Approval must leave a trail. The analyst clears her throat and pulls up a spreadsheet she has been saving. Cells glow in pale yellow where totals do not match subtotals. Names align across months like beads on a string. The HR associate sits straighter. Policy language starts to arrive in his mind like a file reloading. You can almost see the moment he remembers clause numbers and the phrases for retaliation, hostile setting, misuse of funds. He looks at the laminated sheet on the wall and then at the camera above the screen. The red dot is still steady. The intern wipes a single drop from her cheek and speaks in the same calm voice. She asks for the vendor contract. She asks for the signature page. Her pen writes times and names in a neat column. She does not raise her tone. She does not need to. The room hears the shape of consequence anyway. The manager is still smiling, but he has started to blink between sentences. He fumbles a slide. He calls the intern kid and corrects himself. The phone on the left keeps recording. The analyst stops pretending to take notes and begins to log facts. A quiet current passes under the table. It moves from chair to chair. People shift. A foot draws back. A badge lanyard is pinched and unpinched. The intern turns a page in her folder and the plastic sleeve whispers. The clock hands cross the top of the hour. She asks one last question about petty cash entries that appear in duplicate. No one answers. The room waits for someone else to be brave. She closes the folder and thanks the manager for the presentation. Then she thanks the team for their time, for their focus, and for their patience as a short process runs its course. She is the daughter of the Black CEO. She has not yet said it. She does not need to. The process will say it for her. The door will open soon. Badges will blink. Security will arrive with a neutral face and an empty box for a desk drawer. The cleanup begins in the exact place where the laughter tried to live. The second week begins with a badge printed in lowercase, a desk at the end of a row, and a laptop that still carries another employee's wallpaper. She signs the intern handbook, initials every page, and asks for copies. She learns the rhythm of the floor by listening to the printers and the elevator chime. The manager's door opens in half an hour. The sales team laughs after calendar blocks labeled sync. Finance walks in pairs. HR moves like a metronome, steady, efficient, never rushed until suddenly very fast. She studies systems the way new hires study names. Expense approvals, vendor onboarding, travel requests, the petty cash form that requires 2 signatures but often returns with 1. She maps each tool to a person and each person to a habit. One analyst never attaches receipts. One project lead approves his own advances using a shared mailbox. One assistant posts reimbursements at 4:58 p.m., most Fridays. None of it is dramatic. Patterns rarely are. Her task list looks plain. Pull invoices for the new vendor. Cross-check conference registrations. Update a slide with quarterly totals. She does all of it quickly and without commentary. Then adds a step for herself. She traces a single invoice backward through email headers, meeting invites, and a service agreement that arrived without legal watermarks. She highlights the change in language between the sales pitch and the signed scope. Deliverables shrink, price stays the same. She notes who signed and where they were that day. The calendar shows a team off-site with no agenda and no notes. The receipt shows a resort 2 counties away. The floor treats her like air when they need to and a sponge when they want someone to soak up small chores. She takes both roles and thanks them for the opportunity each time. A junior dev asks her to book a car for a senior who is in the same building. She books it, prints the confirmation, and staples it to a policy page that caps rides for trips under a mile. She files both in a thin folder labeled practice. She is building a stack that explains itself without adjectives. Jenna, the analyst, passes her a coffee without asking and a glance that says, "I see it too." They sit in a quiet corner near the server closet where the air runs cold enough to keep them awake. Jenna opens a spreadsheet that tracks per diem claims and flips the sort order. The same 3 surnames float to the top month after month. The dates line up with empty calendars or meetings labeled private. When asked about outcomes, those teams produce glossy slides without raw data. The numbers are round, the kind of round that shows comfort rather than accuracy. The regional manager, Graham, tries small tests. He assigns Maya to arrange snacks for a vendor pitch and then invites her to present the logistics slide without warning. She does it cleanly, rests the clicker on the table, and returns to her seat. He adds a joke about interns needing thick skin. She nods and asks about the due diligence checklist. He says it is fine and moves on. She writes the words due diligence missing in the margin of a legal pad and underlines them once. Lunches reveal more than memos. At the cafeteria, 2 senior PMs describe the new vendor as a friend of the business. The phrase repeats like a rubber stamp in later meetings. It is supposed to signal trust. It signals risk instead. Friends remove friction. Friction is where fraud stalls. Late on a Tuesday, she finds a travel bundle with hotel nights that overlap a mandatory office week. The requester used a personal email to confirm the reservation, then forwarded the bill from a private account. She prints the headers, not the message body. Headers survive edits. She adds them to the practice folder and starts a second one labeled action. The difference is simple. Practice holds lessons. Action holds proof. Luis from HR remains neutral. He answers questions exactly to policy. When she asks how to report retaliation, he cites the clause and the form. When she asks what qualifies as harassment, he points to the training module and the example list. He does not volunteer anymore. He does not shut a door either. She respects that. Procedure is a path if you keep walking. By the end of the week, her notes sketch a diagram more than a diary. Names sit inside boxes. Arrows connect approvals to benefits. The new vendor sits at the center, rechargeable gift cards, conference fees that never appear on agendas, a line called wellness that pays for sweets and wine tastings. Each arrow has a date and a reference ID. The map is tidy and patient. Built with the pace of a person, no one expects to notice anything. She notices everything. She calls home once at night on a balcony where the city hum is louder than her doubts. Her mother, the black CEO, listens without interrupting. When Maya finishes, a short silence holds the line. Then the instruction comes, steady and light. Keep to the policy. Keep your record clean. When the moment arrives, the facts will speak and people will hear them. Maya closes her laptop, places the folders beside it, and sets an early alarm. The moment is not far. Monday begins with a fire alarm test that no one remembered to schedule. People spill into the hallway with paper cups and half thoughts. In the shuffle, the regional manager passes close enough for the smell of his cologne to arrive before his voice. He tells Maya to stay behind after the staff update. His tone is cheerful, his eyes are not. She nods, returns to her desk, and writes the request with the exact timestamp in the margin of her notebook. She has learned to treat casual words like formal notices. They can become that fast. The staff update is a slideshow of numbers that look fine until you ask what is underneath each bar. Growth is green, margins are stable, travel is labeled market development. In the back row, an assistant scrolls through pictures from a weekend retreat that never produced an agenda. The same three managers grin at a resort breakfast. Sunglasses on, conference lanyards tucked into shirts as props. When the slide advances to the new vendor, the room becomes a chorus of yes without melody. Maya waits for outcomes, case studies, anything that points to measurable work. None come. After the meeting, Graham waves her into his office and lets silence work. The blinds are half closed. The lighting is soft in the way that hides the corners of a room. He starts with a mentorship talk. He admires initiative. He values toughness. He calls the coffee incident an unfortunate misunderstanding and suggests the team has already moved on. She listens and does not interrupt. Then he asks what she is working on. She answers with a list in her notebook and adds that she is reconciling receipts with calendar entries because she wants to learn the process. He smiles at the word learn. He asks her to send all reconciliation to his inbox before sharing with finance. She writes down the instruction and repeats it back to him, then asks him to confirm by email. He hesitates and laughs it off. She waits. He does not send it. The tests grow smaller and meaner. Her access to a shared folder disappears for an afternoon, then returns without explanation. A printer job with vendor contracts fails on her machine, but completes when Jenna tries. An email thread about diligence skips her address and quotes her question without context, as if curiosity were misconduct. She does not react. She prints the system messages and files them. She answers each thread by restating the facts and asking for the next step in policy language. Bureaucracy can be a shield when used with precision. Midweek, Jenna finds her in the copy room with a stack of receipts and a tired smile. They split the pile without ceremony. Jenna jokes in a whisper that the stapler has seen more action than procurement. They work in quiet, the rhythm of staple clip tape. Staple clip like a heartbeat. A pattern emerges. Meals labeled working group without meeting minutes. Rides to and from hotels near the office on days without external visitors. Per diems for weekends that coincide with birthdays. When they reach the end, they have a neat row of envelopes and a shared look that says the line is not blurry anymore. Luis from HR walks by the copy room, stops, and asks what they need. Maya presents a neutral request for the latest code of conduct and the anti-retaliation guidance. Luis hands over the documents and waits. She adds that some approvals may have bypassed second signatures and that she would like a refresher on reporting channels. He gives it to her straight. There is a form, there is a hotline, there is a panel that convenes when evidence is documented with dates, amounts, and witnesses. He does not ask who or what, he does not need to. Procedure is a door you open by knocking the right way. That afternoon, an all-hands calendar invite appears with a title that reads, Celebration of Wins. Maya arrives early and chooses a seat with a clean sight line to the front and to the exit. Graham begins with gratitude, thanks the vendor for flexibility, and tells a story about hustle. He gestures toward Maya and says, Our intern is learning what real pace feels like. Laughter tries to form again, and again does not. She raises her hand and asks if the vendor contract has a deliverables appendix. The room stills. He answers yes, of course. She asks if the appendix can be shown. He dodges to the next slide. She writes the dodge as a line item. Jenna writes it too. After the applause, she returns to her desk to find a note that says, Please see me, and a smiley face that does not smile. In the office, Graham drops the smile. He calls her curious in a way that means something else. He tells her to stick to intern tasks. She agrees to do exactly that and then asks for a written list of those tasks. He waves the idea away. She asks again softly and adds that it will help her prioritize. He says he will think about it. They both know he will not. The day closes with a small choice that feels like a hinge. She can take the practice folder home or leave it locked in the drawer. She chooses the drawer. She scans the action folder instead and uploads it to a secure drive with read access set to HR policy addresses. She does not announce it. She does not hint. She simply ensures that the map she has drawn will outlast the noise. On the way out, she passes the lobby where security sits with the calm of people who only move when called. She wonders how long until they are called. Not long, she thinks, and steps into the evening air that smells like rain and fresh paper. The morning opens with a quiet test of boundaries. Maya requests read-only access to the vendor's shared portal, citing a training need. The request routes through 3 people and returns with a yes that looks accidental, as if someone clicked approve while clearing a backlog. Inside the portal, she finds a gallery of case studies with blurred logos, copied language, and dates that jump backward. One PDF still carries a rival firm's footer. She downloads the files, prints the properties pages, and slides them into the action folder without commentary. At 10, Graham hosts a stand-up that lasts longer than the title suggests. He praises velocity, asks for fewer questions, and frames diligence as a tax on momentum. His words fall into the room like policy written in dry erase marker. Jenna stands near the back with a stack of invoices pressed to her hip. When the floor disperses, she meets Maya by the printer and points to 3 consecutive purchase orders that share a reference number. Error or pattern, she says. Pattern, Maya answers and notes the time. By midday, the vendor's account manager arrives with a presentation on partnership growth. He brings branded pastries and a slide deck heavy on gradients and light on substance. He uses phrases like frictionless onboarding and results at scale. Maya watches the corners, not the center. The travel calendar shows he flew in last night, yet his expense log claims 2 prior visits this quarter with hotel nights that overlap all hands dates. She asks a basic question about deliverables acceptance criteria. He praises the spirit of learning and offers to follow up offline. She nods and asks for the follow-up on email addressed to finance and legal. He smiles too long, then agrees. After lunch, Louise stops by her desk with a neutral look and a short envelope. Inside is the formal guidance for initiating an internal review. Printed fresh, no sticky notes, no marks. He says nothing extra, only that the panel convenes on written evidence and that the panel needs a lead complainant who can cite dates, amounts, and witnesses. Maya thanks him and places the envelope under the keyboard tray. Procedure has stepped from theory to logistics. The hallway feels narrower, the clock louder. She breathes in and returns to work as if nothing has shifted. The shift becomes visible at 3. An email arrives from Graham asking all vendor questions to be routed through him to avoid confusion. He copies 2 directors and omits finance. Maya replies with thanks and asks him to confirm that this supersedes the policy flowchart, attaching the relevant page. He does not respond. Instead, her calendar receives a same-day invite for a one-on-one titled Growth Mindset. When she arrives, he speaks about team harmony and the risk of overstepping roles. She asks for clarity on her role. He says learn and support. She says learning includes reconciling numbers to process. He smiles, the sort of smile meant to close a subject without saying so. She does not push. She writes the conversation summary and emails it to him for accuracy. The record grows by one more line. As the floor thins toward evening, the building's hum steadies into a background that lets careful work expand. Maya cross-checks vendor invoices against security badge logs that list entry times for meeting rooms. The big pitch supposedly ran until 9 on a Friday. The room was empty by 6. A weekend strategy session billed 10 hours in a city 200 miles away. The supposed attendees badged into the office that morning. She screenshots the logs with timestamps and file paths visible, then stores them in a folder named for the policy clause on misrepresentation. Before she leaves, she walks the perimeter of the boardroom, not as a ritual, but as a check. The camera above the main screen blinks its steady light, cables lie where they should, a maintenance sticker near the baseboard shows the last inspection date, it matches the facility's log. Small confirmations make large claims credible. She turns off the overheads, stands for a beat in the dim, and pictures the table tomorrow with different people in different chairs. The image is not satisfactory. It is a plan reaching its next step. On the sidewalk, the air is cool and metallic, a hint of rain suspended above traffic. She calls her mother, offers a concise status, and waits. The black CEO does not ask for names. She asks one question: are you within policy? Maya answers, yes. Then keep within it, her mother says. The rest will follow. The line ends. Maya pockets the phone and looks up at the window she just left. Somewhere behind the glass, a printer warms to life and another set of numbers rolls out. Tomorrow, those numbers will meet their mirrors. And mirrors do not flatter. They show what is there. Tuesday starts with an apology that is not an apology. Graham stops by Maya's desk with a fresh mug and a rehearsed line about team spirit. He sets the mug down with care, too much care, like handling evidence. She thanks him and writes the time in her notebook. Small rituals keep the mind even. She opens the vendor portal again and compares file versions. The latest case study now has a new footer and a different date. She pulls the earlier copy from her archive and notes the change. Revision can be honest or it can be convenient. This one is convenient. Jenna appears with a quiet look that says she has something that cannot write an email. They take the back stair to the small focus room that smells like dry marker. Jenna spreads screenshots across the table, each with file paths and created by lines. 3 invoices share identical line items and unit counts, only the dates shift. She has matched the totals to the corporate card statements. The same card pays for vendor dinners and the manager's personal streaming service 2 days later. Rounding errors do not buy subscriptions. Maya takes a breath and begins to list the artifacts in the order a panel will expect to see them. Source, date, amount, approver, benefit. She keeps the verbs plain, she keeps her voice level. Luis steps in at the knock of his own knuckles. He asks if this is a good time and closes the door only when they nod. He places a blank report form on the table and a second sheet with the hotline number. He reminds them that retaliation claims must cite specific acts. He adds that a bystander can be a witness and a complainant can be a witness too if the record is clean. Maya says her record is clean. He says then, keep it that way. He looks at the pile without touching it and tells them the panel can convene within 48 hours if materials arrive before the end of day. He leaves without a pep talk. Procedure does not need pep. Maya and Jenna divide the work. Jenna will pull the raw exports from the expense system, not the dashboards. Maya will tie those to calendar entries and badge logs. They agree to capture screenshots with the system clock visible and to avoid forward chains that could be accused of context cuts. Maya opens a new document and writes the factual narrative in short present tense. On this date, a manager approves an invoice with a duplicate reference number. On this date, the vendor charges 3 hotels inside the same city while the project team badges into the office. On this date, a coffee was poured in a meeting and no one intervened. She stops and removes the last line. The panel will see that clip later if it is needed. The conduct case can stand on money alone. Midday brings a detour. Graham invites Maya to join a vendor lunch. He phrases it like a chance to learn how partners think. She accepts and chooses a chair with the wall behind her and a clear view of the table. The account manager talks through a vision for next quarter. The numbers are smooth and the verbs are proud. Maya asks for a timeline on deliverables already billed. She asks how acceptance was captured. The account manager says the project team verbally signed off. Verbal is not a control. She keeps her face steady and repeats the question in the form that legal will read. What artifact shows acceptance? He promises a link after dessert. Back at her desk, the promised link arrives. It lands in her inbox from a personal address with a short note that says, "Please keep this internal." The folder contains image files of whiteboards with dates added last week. The metadata was last modified 2 days ago by a device that has never appeared in the corporate logs. She saves the properties, screens, and closes the tab. The idea that no one would check metadata is the same idea that leads people to pour coffee and expect laughs. It is the same undercurrent. It is the same mistake. By late afternoon, the packet is ready. Maya prints the index and the form. She initials each page where evidence flows to a claim. Jenna adds her witness statement with timestamps and names. Luis meets them in a small conference room that holds 4 chairs and a single clock. He reads the first 2 pages, then the index, and then he stops reading and starts processing. He scans the QR code on the form that opens the case system and assigns it a number. He tells them the panel will meet tomorrow morning. He asks whether they fear retaliation between now and then. Maya says she expects more tests. He nods and offers interim guidance. All requests for access changes should route through HR. All one-on-ones with the manager should be recorded in writing within an hour of the meeting. All deliverable documents should be copied to the case file. Evening falls against the glass as if trying the locks. Maya returns to her desk and cleans the surface until only the laptop and 2 folders remain. She sends a short message to her mother with a single sentence. Case opened. Her mother calls. The black CEO listens for the tone more than the words. She asks one question. Did you give them everything they needed? Maya says yes. Then let the process work, her mother says. If people have been hurt, the process is how we protect them. They end the call without a plan to meet. Plans are already moving. On the way out, Maya passes the boardroom. The table is empty. The camera light is steady. She stands for a moment and pictures the room tomorrow with the panel at one end, Luis at the side, and the door closed. She is not eager and she is not afraid. She is inside the rules. She has a map of the last 6 months and the receipts to match it. If anyone asks who taught her to build a record this clean, she will say no one. She will say policy taught her. She will say the quiet feeling after the coffee did the rest. The panel meets at 9 in a small conference room with glass that turns opaque at the flip of a switch. Luis opens with the case number and the scope. He reads the rule that governs misrepresentation and the one that covers retaliation. No speeches. No opinions, facts first. Maya slides the index across the table and waits while 3 panel members scan the pages. She has grouped the packet by claim, not by artifact. Each section begins with a 1-line assertion and ends with receipts, logs, and signatures in the order a reader would need them. They start with the harmless items. Duplicate reference numbers, hotel nights stacked inside a commute, taxi rides between buildings connected by a climate-controlled bridge, a vendor case study copied from an old pitch deck that still shows another firm's font in the footer. The panelists mark items with a pencil, no comments, only small diagonal lines on the margins. The questions arrive in short bursts. Where did this file originate? Who had approval rights on this date? Which policy section establishes 2 signatures for petty cash? Maya answers in plain present tense and points to the lines. Jenna adds the cross checks where numbers roll up. Luis keeps time and writes who spoke when. Graham is invited at 10. He comes in with his jacket buttoned and a look meant to say, this is an inconvenience. He sits, thanks the panel for their dedication, and frames the past months as a sprint through changing markets. He calls the vendor a partner we trust and says the team used verbal sign-offs during crunches. One panelist asks him to identify the acceptance artifact for the invoices labeled complete. He says, the outcomes are visible in growth. The panelist repeats the question, what artifact shows acceptance? Silence stretches a 3 count. Graham defers to the vendor on documentation and pivots to culture. The The pivot lands with the weight of a chair dragged across the tile. Maya keeps her face still and takes notes. She writes every question in the left column and every answer in the right. When Graham mentions the coffee as a misunderstanding, Luis pauses him and reads the definition of humiliating conduct from the training module. He notes the presence of a camera in the boardroom and marks the time of the incident as recorded in the calendar system. Graham says he apologized and gestures toward the mug he delivered yesterday. The panel records that too. An apology is not an undo. At the break, Jenna steps into the hallway with Maya and whispers the thing they both see. He is confident in the room, thin on paper. You can run on charm for a while. Paper decides how long a while can be. They return to their seats. The vendor account manager joins by video, framed by a neutral wall and a plant that looks borrowed. He confirms the friendship between teams and speaks about service culture. When asked directly about deliverables, he offers whiteboard photos. A panelist asks about metadata. The manager says his team consolidates assets to avoid version confusion. The panelist asks again for the original timestamps. He says he will check. The call ends with no artifact. Midday, IT sends a sealed envelope to the panel room. Inside are access logs for shared drives in the vendor portal. The entries line up with the invoices and with travel that never happened. A guest device uploaded the case study revisions 2 days ago from a network outside the building. The user account belonged to a contractor whose contract ended last quarter. Someone kept their credentials alive. Luis logs a second case number and splits the scope. One investigation never has just one thread. Graham requests a sidebar with the chair and returns with a new tone. He suggests a misunderstanding in the approval workflow and names a project lead who could clarify. The panel notes the shift and calls the lead. The lead joins and gives short answers. He approved what came across his desk because he trusted the manager who said legal had cleared it. Legal has not seen the contract. The lead looks at his hands when he says it. The panel asks if anyone pressured him to skip steps. He says no, then corrects himself. He says he felt the pace more than pressure. The distinction sounds thin, even to him. By late afternoon, the panel has enough to move past questions. Luis outlines immediate steps. Freeze reimbursements tied to flagged projects. Suspend vendor access pending artifacts that match invoices. Shift approval rights to a separate chain while the review completes. He asks Maya if she has any further material relevant to retaliation. She presents the access removal notice and the email, instructing her to route reconciliations through the manager. She adds her contemporaneous notes from the one-on-one. The panel accepts the documents and thanks her for the clarity of her record. Clarity is a polite word for patience under strain. When the room clears, Luis walks Maya to the elevator. He does not give reassurances. He cannot guarantee. He gives instructions. If she receives new requests that alter her scope, forward them to HR. If anyone asks about the case, refer them to the panel chair. If she feels unsafe, call him directly and then security. He adds one more line, free of ceremony. You did this exactly right. Back at her desk, the floor has developed a new quiet. Conversations end when she approaches and restart after she passes. Jenna keeps working as if nothing has changed. That helps. Maya writes a short summary email to herself so the day cannot blur, then locks the action folder and backs up the digital packet to the case system. She thinks about the moment that started this cascade, the mug tilted over a calm face, the room testing whether cruelty would pass as humor. It did not pass. It documented itself. She calls her mother from a bench in the lobby and gives a headline update. The black CEO listens again for facts over emotion. She asks if Maya stayed within policy. Yes. She asks if any names need to be walled off from the case. Not yet. Then hold steady, her mother says. Remember why you are doing this. Maya pockets the phone and watches two security officers confer in low voices by the turnstiles. The building is the same as yesterday, but the lines inside it have moved. Tomorrow they will move again, and when they stop moving, the map will look like what it always should have looked like. Clean. By morning, the floor had learned the new rules without anyone saying them aloud. Reimbursements bounce instead of clearing. Calendar blocks labeled sync become working sessions where people actually open policy pages. Graham arrives later than usual and walks a slow loop as if checking for a misplaced key. He holds his jacket over one arm and a phone in the other. His smile is pinned on but directed at no one. Maya notes the time and the way conversations narrow when he approaches. Systems teach with speed once they are pointed the right way. Jenna meets Maya at the printer with a sheet that looks blank until it tilts toward the light. Watermark. Draft. Someone tried to push an addendum through at dawn, a page that would backdate deliverables acceptance by a month. The track changes are off, the metadata is on. Maya photographs the property screen with the system clock visible and forwards it to Luis. He replies with one word, received, and one instruction held. At 10, IT runs a quiet sweep. Access badges still open doors, but drive prompts for re-authentication. A banner appears above the email client reminding staff that preservation is in effect. No deletions. No archiving. Graham calls a stand-up and speaks about business continuity. He frames the freeze as a routine control. He does not meet Maya's eyes. When he dismisses the group, he asks her to stay and folds his arms in a posture that wants to look casual. He suggests she focus on training modules for the week while others handle vendor matters. She asks if that is a formal reassignment. He says it is a friendly suggestion. She writes down the phrase friendly suggestion and emails herself the summary before she moves. Before lunch, the vendor account manager reappears on video. He now has a new title in his signature, a step up that reads like insulation. He shares a link to a fresh folder labeled evidence and asks the team to consider the spirit of partnership. Maya opens the folder and finds scans of napkins, whiteboards, and a photo of a hallway schedule that could be anywhere. The timestamps cluster within 48 hours of the panel meeting. She uploads the folder into the case system as material provided by the vendor and flags the timing. She does not comment beyond that. Commentary is an invitation. Facts are a floor. Luis stops by with a printed notice for Graham. Effective today, approval authority on specific projects shifts to a temporary chain. The wording is spare. Graham reads it twice and looks at Maya as if the page had her signature on it. She is only a witness in this scene. She stays that way. When he asks for a copy for his records, Luis says the system already recorded the receipt and notes the exact time out loud. It is a small sentence that carries the weight of a gate closing. Afternoon brings the first slip. An assistant deletes a thread that mentions verbal sign-off. The restoration banner catches it and returns the email to the inbox with a tag that says, preserved by legal hold. Word travels faster than policy once an example lands. People stop moving messages to personal accounts. They stop moving at all unless it is necessary. In the quiet, Maya finishes a simple comparison that has been waiting. She overlays hotel charges with taxi logs and security footage timestamps. The footage shows a dark lobby at the hour a meal was billed for 10. The taxi logs show no cars arriving or leaving within 2 hours of the bill. She adds the stills and index numbers and closes the loop. Near 3, Jenna slides into the chair beside Maya and rests a palm flat on the desk. There is pressure in the room, she says without naming it. Maya nods. She writes a line to herself. Pressure feels like urgency without a task. Give it a task. So they do. They draft a clean recap for the panel with 5 bullets turned into sentences. What happened? What changed? What evidence arrived? What the vendor supplied? What next action they propose? The words are small and exact. They send it and return to their work with an ease that comes from a plan. At 4:30, a rumor breaks the surface. The CEO is on site. The floor stiffens like someone set a book on a sheet of paper-thin glass. Maya does not change speed. She files 2 receipts, logs a call, saves a screenshot of an access prompt timing out on Graham's machine. She texts her mother one line. I am at my desk. The reply arrives 1 minute later and says, carry on. Security takes their posts near the boardroom at 5, present without posture. The panel reconvenes, this time with the door open for a moment so the floor sees who walks in. Graham enters with a single folder and no notebook. The vendor appears on the screen again. When the door shuts, the glass turns opaque and the office exhales. Maya watches the red light above the camera blink its steady blink and thinks of the first day, the pour, the silence, the line that was crossed without resistance. That line is visible now in ink, in logs, in numbers that do not bend when pressed. She opens her laptop and continues to work because that is what the moment requires. If a reveal is coming, it will happen inside policy and on paper. That is the point. That is the lesson. Night settles early against the glass, but the floor stays lit. Maya keeps working until the clock reaches the edge of normal hours. The panel room opens and people spill out in controlled pairs. Luis approaches with a measured pace and a short update. The panel is issuing interim actions. Vendor access is suspended pending originals. Approvals on the named projects are rerouted. A preservation order extends to chat tools and personal devices used for work. He does not say outcomes, he does not have to. The air shifts the way a room shifts when a verdict has a direction. Graham returns to his office and closes the door. Blinds angle down, a light glows under the frame as if the floor were a stage. 20 minutes pass. IT flags a login attempt from his machine to a restricted archive where the new controls live. The attempt pings a dashboard with a tidy chime. A second attempt follows from a personal laptop that has never touched the network. Legal receives the alerts at the same time as HR. The new rules are doing exactly what rules are built to do. Maya does not celebrate. She records that a change in access triggered a behavior worth noting, then returns to the numbers. Jenna forwards a set of direct messages she exported under the preservation order. The messages are short and sharp, phrases that invite pressure without saying it. Do not slow me down. Handle it. That deck needs to be delivered. The timestamps line up with late bills and edits to invoices. Maya indexes each message, then pairs them with artifacts. The effect is not dramatic on a page. It is steady. It is the sort of alignment that makes a case feel inevitable. Near 7, an email arrives to the whole floor from an address labeled Leadership Office. It requests a brief in-person check-in tomorrow morning, staggered by teams, to confirm that everyone understands the operational changes and knows where to send questions. The subject line is neutral. The schedule is not. The first group includes finance, operations, and HR. The second group includes project leads. The third group includes sales and vendor relations. People read the order and connect the pattern. No one says anything out loud. Maya takes a call in a small phone room with a light that hums at a fixed pitch. Luis walks her through safety measures that now apply to her directly. If she is asked to meet alone with anyone named in the case, she can request a witness or submit a written response. If her access changes without a ticket, she should notify HR and security. He tells her the company remains responsible for protecting her while she is an intern, and while she is an employee, and while she is both. He does not ask about her background. He does not need to. The process is the same no matter who she is. She thanks him and writes the new protocol on the first page of a notebook, as if starting a fresh chapter with clear margins. Back at her desk, she finds a calendar invite from Graham for a one-on-one at 8:15 before the leadership check-in. The subject line says, "Touch base." She replies with a request to move the meeting after the briefing so she aligns with updated instructions. He does not respond. Instead, a chat pops up from an assistant asking for access to a shared folder where Maya's reconciliations live. The assistant phrases it as a housekeeping task. Maya declines and points to preservation. She copies HR on the note, so the refusal is not a secret. The assistant stops typing. A small silence takes the shape of a decision that did not land. Jenna swings by with her backpack already zipped. She asks if Maya needs a ride. Maya says she will stay 10 more minutes. 5 minutes later, security walks the main aisle with the quiet gait of people used to being ignored until they are not. One officer pauses at Graham's door and knocks. When the door opens, the officer delivers a short statement and a paper receipt. Temporary badge revocation pending morning briefing. The words are dry, their meaning is not. Graham looks past the officer and finds Maya at her desk. Their eyes meet for 1 second. It is not a scene. It is an acknowledgement of a line now drawn with ink. Maya powers down, locks the folders, and walks to the elevator with a steady pace. Outside, the city has a low drone of traffic and crosswalk beeps. She calls her mother and gives a precise report. Interim actions issued. Vendor suspended. Badge controls tightened. Tomorrow, briefings by team. The black CEO listens, then asks the same question she always asks. Are you inside the policy? Yes. Then let the structure carry the weight. Structures are built for this. Maya ends the call and watches a bus pull away from the curb. She thinks of the first day, the mug, the laugh that did not form, the camera that did not blink. Tomorrow will not be revealed by stunt, it will be revealed by sequence. At home, she lays out her notebook, rereads the timeline, and marks a few gaps that can close in the morning with simple asks for originals. She sets 2 alarms. She writes a single line on a sticky note and places it on the laptop. Calm is preparation with proof. She sleeps, the building sleeps, the case does not, logs write themselves, backups spool, all the quiet systems that never ask for attention keep doing what they do best. They remember. Morning begins with staggered briefings that move like a tide across the floor. Finance files first. The door closes. 10 minutes later, they exit quieter than they entered, carrying printed sheets with short sentences and long implications. Operations follows, then HR, then project leads. Each group comes out with the same posture, a little straighter at the spine, a little more careful with their eyes. The email from leadership had promised clarity. Clarity arrives as procedures, not speeches. Maya waits for the last wave, the one that includes sales and vendor relations. Graham is already seated in the open area, jacket buttoned, looking at nothing in particular. His badge hangs on a temporary clip, the spare kind facilities kept in a drawer. He does not try to make conversation. He taps his phone, but the taps do not send messages. The floor has learned that writing can be a form of witness. Inside the briefing room, a table holds a stack of one-page notices. Luis stands to the side with a clipboard. A senior counsel reads from the sheet in a voice steady enough to land each word. Effective immediately, approvals shift to an interim chain. Vendor access is suspended pending originals. Preservation remains in place. Retaliation will be treated as a separate violation. Questions route to the panel chair. A final line notes that leadership will address staff after the briefings conclude. The sheet is plain, almost spare. Its force comes from the timing. Graham raises a hand and asks whether this is a temporary slowdown or a signal of mistrust. The counsel replies that it is a compliance measure. He adds that the company will not discuss open cases. Graham smiles without humor and says he values transparency. Luis notes the exchange without looking up. Maya pockets the sheet and takes the seat farthest from the door. She keeps her pen capped. There is nothing to add to this page. When the session releases, the floor realigns around the new rules. Dashboards that used to refresh every hour now wait for approvals. Meeting invites add a second attendee from finance without needing to be asked. Jenna appears at Maya's side with a small nod. She has secured the raw export for last quarter's reimbursements and has already done a quick pivot. The same 3 surnames still float to the top even after filters are cleaned. Patterns survive scrubbing when they are real. They agree to save the result, name it with the case number, and send only the link to the panel. At 10:15, the leadership message lands. All staff to the boardroom. The floor moves in a slow, evenly spaced stream. The room that once held a mug tilted over an intern's face now holds rows of chairs and a silence that belongs to a moment before a decision. Maya sits in the 3rd row with a clean line to the exit and to the podium. She can see the camera light, steady as ever. She can see the laminated conduct sheet on the wall, the same one she read on day 1. A hush draws itself across the carpet when the CEO enters. Ava Carter walks to the front with a legal pad and nothing else. She greets the room the way you greet a team that has done hard work and is about to do more. She does not use the word family. She uses the word responsibility. She states that the company has initiated a formal review of certain vendor relationships and internal approvals. She states that interim controls are now active. She thanks the staff for preserving records. She thanks those who brought concerns through proper channels. Her choice of words lands gently and still manages to close the space around the subject. Ava does not mention her daughter. She does not need to. She says the company will not discuss specifics. She says respect for due process is non-negotiable. She says the goal is simple and demanding. We will be worthy of the trust placed in us. The room breathes. Not relief, not fear, something steadier. People look down at their notes as if the paper might hold them upright. Graham stands and asks a question about morale. He wonders aloud whether the tone of the review risks damaging culture. Ava nods, listens fully, and answers that culture is the work you do when rules are inconvenient. She adds that the only morale hit worth worrying about is the morale of people who did the right thing and were ignored. She thanks him for the question. The exchange is brief and final. It draws a line without drawing blood. After the meeting, the boardroom empties into hallways that feel wider. Security steps back to their usual posts. The panel room stays closed, a neutral square of glass holding the shape of a table. Maya returns to her desk and finds 2 emails waiting. One from the vendor with a revised link labeled Originals, which on inspection are scans of scans stitched together yesterday. The other from IT with a log that shows an attempt to upload those files from a device registered to a former contractor. She adds both to the case system with a single sentence of description and no adjectives. Jenna leans on the corner of Maya's desk and whispers the question that has been sitting between them since the first pour of coffee. Do you want to be the one to say it? Maya sets her pen down. Not yet. The process will say it when it needs to. She looks at the camera light and then at the laminated sheet again. She thinks of the first day, the manager's voice inviting a laugh, the room hesitating, the silence that learned to be useful. The structure is holding. The story can hold too. At noon, Luis walks by with an update that is only 4 words. The panel resumes after lunch. He keeps moving. The phrase follows him like a heartbeat. Maya opens her notebook to the next page, draws a line under the morning's notes, and writes a single sentence to frame the afternoon. Paper is catching up to behavior. Now let behavior meet paper. After lunch, the panel room fills again, the glass turning opaque as the door seals. Luis restates the case number and the scope so the afternoon has a clean edge. He starts with a timeline slide that is not a slide at all, but a printed sheet placed in front of each person. It runs left to right with dates, approvals, and artifacts. There is no color, only lines. Paper that looks plain makes decisions easier. Maya sits 2 seats from the end, notebook open, pen capped, hands still. They begin with the vendor's newest link labeled Originals. IT has pulled the file properties and laid them beside the images. The dates do not align with the invoices. The device signature belongs to a contractor whose access should have ended last quarter. The panel chair asks the vendor, connected by video, to explain the mismatch. The account manager says his team aggregated proof to simplify review. The chair asks for the unaggregated proof with native timestamps. The manager says he will revert. The chair notes the promise and asks again for originals. A promise is not a document. Graham speaks next, this time with fewer adjectives. He says the team relied on verbal sign-offs because the quarter was fast. He points to growth graphs and says, outcomes justify pace. A panelist asks whether pace justifies bypassing a second signature on petty cash. Graham says the second approver was out of office. The panelist slides a calendar printout across the table that shows the approver badged in. Graham asks for context. The printout is the context. Luis marks the exchange with the measured tap of a pen against the margin of his notes. They pivot to travel charges. IT has matched hotel invoices with badge logs and camera timestamps. One dinner for 10 coincides with a dark lobby and empty parking lot. A retreat that billed a weekend appears on a timeline where every purported attendee entered the office Friday morning and left by 6. There is no overlapping footage of arrivals at the resort. The vendor says they had a satellite team. The panel asks for names. None are provided. The chair wrote a short instruction on the pad in front of him and slid it to Luis. Luis stands, steps out, and returns with security to confirm a preservation request at the hotel and the taxi service. The gears extend past the room. Maya answers questions when they land on her side of the table. She sticks to simple present tense. On this date, this approval occurred. On this date, this expense was posted. This file came from this path. She avoids inference unless asked to connect 2 artifacts. When asked, she draws the line once and stops. Jenna fills in roll-ups where numbers repeat. They do not argue with anyone in the room. They let the paper argue. Midway through the session, legal introduces a second case number tied to account access. The same machine that uploaded revised case studies attempted to open a restricted archive after badge changes went into effect. The attempt failed. The log exists. Graham asks who had the password to the archive. IT replies that access rotated last night and that notifications went to the approved chain. Graham says he did not see it. IT confirms delivery. The panel does not comment. Silence can be a statement. The vendor requests a recess to gather material. The chair grants 15 minutes and asks that any evidence arrive with native metadata and a named custodian. The video feed goes dark. In the quiet, Luis reviews next steps aloud so no one confuses the process with emotion. Interim controls remain in effect. Approval authority stays in the temporary chain. Any retaliation will be treated as a new violation. He asks if anyone needs a break. No one stands. When the vendor returns, he has whiteboard photos with new timestamps that still postdate the invoices by weeks. He has a hallway schedule printed and scanned. He has a selfie with a client logo over the shoulder that does not belong to this company. The panel notes the submissions and sets them aside. Originals mean the first thing, not the newest version of the same thing. The manager tries to soften the moment with words like partnership and trust. The chair thanks him and moves on. By late afternoon, the panel has what it needs to move from questions to provisional findings. Luis reads them in a voice meant for clarity. Evidence does not support invoice acceptance as billed. Documentation provided by the vendor lacks provenance. Travel expenses conflict with internal logs. An attempt to access restricted archives occurred after controls changed. He closes the folder and says the company will take immediate protective actions while the review completes. There is a pause that feels like a door hinge. It turns. Security is called to the corridor outside the panel room. They arrive as neighbors, not as a spectacle. Graham is asked to surrender his badge pending final determination. He complies with a face that looks surprised only to the degree that anyone could be surprised by a series of doors that follow one another. He asks to gather personal effects. He's assigned an escort and a box. The walk is quiet. People keep their eyes on their screens. There is dignity in not turning it into theater. Back in the room, the chair thanks Maya and Jenna for careful work. He notes the precision of their records. He thanks Luis and IT for speed and restraint. He schedules a follow-up for the next morning to address any overnight materials. The session adjourns without applause. These moments do not want applause. Maya steps into the hallway and feels the floor return to normal sounds. Printers warming, keyboards tapping, phones buzzing with small questions that have clear answers. She writes a short, factual email to herself, capturing the findings and the timestamp of the badge surrender. She copies it to the case system. She texts her mother a single line, interim actions executed. The reply comes back fast, stay within policy. She smiles because the line has become a rhythm they both keep. On her way back to her desk, she passes the boardroom. The camera light holds steady as ever. The laminated conduct sheet still hangs level. The table is bare, except for a stack of blank agendas waiting for a meeting that will be different from the ones before it. She sits, breathes once, and opens her laptop. The case is not over. It is simply moved into the part where structures carry weight in public. The work does not change. It only becomes easier to see. Morning finds the floor settling into its new shape. The inbox is quieter, not because there is less to do, but because people have learned to write only what matters. Facilities have placed a neutral sign outside the panel room that says reserved. IT has posted a short notice about archived chats and device backups. No one complains. The building hum feels like a machine reset to factory settings. At 9, an interim approvals grid goes live. Requests that once skimmed across a single manager now step through finance, legal, and a second approver who is not part of the project. The form looks plain. A column for amount, a column for purpose, a column for evidence. A link box waits for artifacts. Submissions either attach proof or they do not move. People learn the route in one morning. Friction has a way of clarifying intent. Graham's office door is open and empty. A cardboard box sits on the desk, edges neatly folded, a small stack of notebooks inside. Security waits by the elevators with the patience of people trained not to fill silence. An email from leadership goes out to the floor. It is 5 sentences long. It thanks staff for following preservation guidance. It notes that an interim leader will cover regional approvals. It reiterates the prohibition on retaliation. It says questions should go to the panel chair. It ends with, we will keep doing the work and we will do it the right way. The interim leader is a quiet director from another region who arrives with a legal pad and a short nod. She stops by each team, asks what is blocked, and unblocks what can be unblocked without bending rules. She tells a project lead that a launch can wait 2 days for clean sign-off. The lead says the client will be upset. She says the client will be more upset by an audit later. People accept that math faster than they would have last week. Jenna and Maya split their morning between tidy tasks and a single delicate one. They review the vendor contract line by line for a clause that could allow termination for failure to provide originals. The clause exists, written in the calm tone of contracts that plan for bad weather on clear days. Legal confirms the reading at noon and drafts a notice. It is spare, procedural, and exact about dates. It does not accuse. It simply states that acceptance cannot be verified and that access remains suspended. The vendor replies with a long message about partnership, brand risk, and mutual benefit. Legal answers with the same 3 sentences and a request for native files. The echo is the point. Luis checks in with Maya at her desk. He asks about any new contact, any changes to access, any awkward encounters. She mentions the assistant who asked for the reconciliations and then went quiet. He nods and says behavior often calms when the process is visible. He reminds her she can request a witness to any meeting. She says she knows. He asks if she needs time away from the floor. She says no, distance would look like fear. Work is steadier. The afternoon brings a pulse of outside noise. A gossip site posts a blind item about a regional shakeup at a well-known company. Someone slacks a screenshot into a private chat and then deletes it when they remember the banner. The deletion does not matter. The hold has it. The room notices and then lets the thought pass. The only story that counts is the one in the system of record. Ava walks the floor with the interim leader, stopping at clusters of desks, not to hold court, but to be seen doing the simple things leaders sometimes forget to do. She asks what is blocked. She thanks people for the documentation. She tells a junior analyst that their tidy workbook saved the panel an hour. She does not mention her daughter. When she reaches Maya's row, her eyes pass over Maya and keep moving. It is not distance, it is discipline. Near 3, the panel reconvenes for a short session to log overnight items. IT has retrieved badge video from the hotel that shows no entrance at the billed hours. The taxi service has provided a zero-result search for the routes on the invoices. The vendor has sent another folder with embedded images that still fail provenance checks. Luis reads each entry into the record with the clipped rhythm of someone who values cadence over emphasis. The chair notes a provisional intent to terminate the vendor pending counsel's final review. He does not look at anyone when he says it. He looks at the page. Maya returns to her desk and opens a blank document titled, "What Changes?" She writes, "The small things first. 2 signatures on cash. Travel booked through the system, not after the fact. Vendor acceptance captured in the tool, not in a hallway. Cameras checked as a matter of routine, not as an exception." She adds one more line that is not a rule but should be. When a laugh asks for your consent, check who it protects. At 5, the elevators open and Graham steps out with his escort and the box. The floor does not turn into an audience. Keys tap, printers run, a chair squeaks and then stops. He does not look left or right. He walks to the turnstiles, places the box on the floor, and hands over the badge. The light blinks and stays red. The escort nods. They leave. The room's sound returns to normal in less than a minute. Maya writes a single sentence in her notebook. Badge surrendered at 17:06. No disturbance. She files the note and closes the cover. She has not revealed who she is. She does not plan to, not yet. The day did not require it. The work spoke. The structure carried the weight. She powers down, pockets her phone, and heads for the elevator. In the glass, she catches her own reflection for a second. It looks like anyone who did their job carefully in a place that finally remembered how to be careful back. By the next morning, the building feels lighter, like someone opened a window you did not know was painted shut. The interim approvals grid is already changing behavior. People come to meetings with artifacts instead of adjectives. A project lead arrives 10 minutes early to ask where acceptance lives in the tool. In the past, he would have said, "Trust me." Today, he asks where to click. That is progress measured in small motions. Maya starts at her desk with a checklist that barely needs ink anymore. Preserve, link, index, Send. She reviews overnight logs from IT and finds one more attempt to reach the restricted archive, this time from a tablet tied to an old conference room. The access fails, the alert still teaches. She forwards the entry to the case system with a one-line note that names the device, the time, and the policy clause. Routine has become armor. Jenna arrives with coffee and a printout of reimbursements that finally shows something new. 2 of the usual surnames have vanished from the top. Their approvals hit the interim chain and bounced. The system did not accuse them. It simply asked for proof and waited. When proof did not arrive, the requests stayed put. Jenna grins for the first time in days and says, "This is what clean feels like." Maya lets herself smile back. Wins do not need to be loud to count. At 10, legal circulates a draft termination notice for the vendor. It cites failure to provide originals, conflicts with internal logs, and misuse of access. It references exact dates and artifacts and leaves a motion on the cutting room floor. The letter waits only for leadership to sign. The interim leader reads it twice, initials the corner, and sends it on. Counsel replies with a meeting time for signatures after lunch. The path from facts to action has lost friction. Luis schedules individual debriefs with people who touched approvals. They are not inquisitions, they are cleanups. He asks each person to walk him through a single transaction and to point to the artifact that proves acceptance. Some do it easily, some do not. When a senior PM says, "I trusted the process," Luis asks him to show where the process lives on the page. The silence that follows is not hostile, it is educational. He thanks them and notes the gaps that training can close. Rena, the project manager who once looked away during the coffee incident, stops by Maya's desk with a look that sits between apology and exhaustion. She says she filed a complaint last quarter and never heard back. She says she did not push. She did not want to be the person who made things messy. Maya listens and says the only sentence that helps in moments like this: "Thank you for telling me." She gives Rena the current channels and the case number and the assurance that this time the record is alive. Rena nods, relieved, and a little ashamed. Culture is not a speech. It is the accumulation of small braveries. Near noon, the vendor sends one last folder. It is full of PDFs with flattened metadata and a note that asks everyone to consider the partnership at stake. Legal files the folder without opening the PDFs. The note goes into the record as an exhibit of what not to do. The termination letter is signed at 12:15. IT disables the vendor account at 12:16. Security pulls visitor credentials at 12:17. 3 numbers in a row that feel like a lock turning. Ava appears on the floor after lunch with the interim leader, again, moving in the quiet way of people who know attention is already tuned to them. She does not gather a crowd. She asks 3 people what would make their work easier under the new grid. She listens. She agrees to small changes that do not bend rules. She says thank you more than she says please. When she reaches Maya's row, she pauses, looks at the laminated conduct sheet, and then looks at the camera light. The light is steady. The sheet is level. She moves on. Mid-afternoon, the panel meets one more time to log the vendor termination and to set next steps for internal roles. 2 names besides Graham have accumulated enough weight to require action. 1 approved duplicates after being asked about them. 1 encouraged verbal sign-off and billed travel on days he never left the building. Luis reads the findings and the protective measures. Suspensions pending final determination. Access changes. Equipment collection. HR will handle the logistics with security. There is no victory in the words, only gravity. Maya answers a handful of follow-up questions about sequence and custody of files. She keeps the present tense and leaves judgment to the page. Jenna supplies a roll-up of reimbursements with a footnote that explains why round numbers at scale signal comfort rather than reality. The chair thanks them and adds a line to the record that will matter to anyone who reads it later. The case was enabled by prompt documentation from staff following policy. It is the dry credit that means the most. At 4, the floor receives 2 emails a minute apart. The first announces the termination of the vendor for failure to provide originals and for conflicts with internal controls. The second announces administrative leave for 2 managers pending completion of the review. The messages are spare, free of adjectives, and signed by leadership and HR together. The room does not gasp. It absorbs. It returns to work with the unshowy relief of a fever breaking. Maya sits back for the first time and looks at the line from day one to now. A pour, a silence, a record. A room that learned to speak in policy, not posture. She has not said who she is. She will if the moment requires it. The point was never revealed. It was the correction. Still, there is one more step, and it belongs to leadership, not to an intern. A calendar invite lands at 4:30. All staff, boardroom. 5 o'clock, the subject line is a single word, standards. Maya closes her notebook, breathes once, and walks with the stream toward the room where the story started. The camera light waits. The laminated sheet waits. The table waits. The lesson is ready to be said out loud. At 5, the boardroom fills until the air has the soft charge of a storm that will not shout. People take chairs and even rows. The laminated conduct sheet is still level on the wall. The camera light is steady, as if it has been waiting to witness a different kind of meeting. Ava enters with the interim leader, Luis, and counsel. She brings no slides. She sets a legal pad on the table and looks at the room the way you look at a team. You expect to hold a line, not cross it. She begins with what has already happened. The vendor contract is terminated for failure to provide originals and for conflicts with internal controls. 2 managers are on administrative leave pending completion of review. Interim approvals remain in effect. Preservation stays on. Her sentences are short on purpose. She calls policy by its section numbers and lets the numbers carry the weight. The room does not shift in its chairs. The room listens. Then she names the harm. When shortcuts are rewarded, honest work becomes the slow path. When cruelty is excused as humor, silence becomes a condition of employment. She says that ends here, not in theory, in practice. She points once to the conduct sheet and once to the camera, as if to say the rules and the record are not decorations. They are the roof and the floor. A hand goes up. A project lead asks how to rebuild trust with clients who expect speed. Ava answers that speed survives only when you can defend it on paper. We will be fast, she says. We will also be printable. Another hand asks what happens when a senior says, trust me. Ava says the reply is, show me. If they cannot show, the answer is no. The exchanges land like pegs hammered into the ground of a tent that has been flapping too long. She thanks the panel, IT, and HR by function, not by name. She thanks staff who documented concerns through proper channels. Then she says there is one more thing to make plain, so rumors do not do the work. A few heads lift. The camera light keeps its small red dot. She says an intern helped surface the issues. The intern followed policy, preserved evidence, and respected the process. That is the story that matters. She pauses, lets the quiet stabilize, and then finishes the sentence, everyone has been circling without saying, the intern is my daughter. The room does not gasp, it inhales. Ava keeps going before meaning can be borrowed by anyone else. This was not a stunt, she says. It was a training rotation through the hardest part of leadership, which is seeing the organization as it is. She adds the line that will matter when it is repeated outside this room. The process would be the same if she were anyone else. It was the same. The panel did not know her last name until today. She turns to Luis. Luis nods, confirming the record without ceremony. Maya stands because the moment asks for it. She does not step forward. She does not claim a center. She says she learned 2 things that will be useful whether she stays in this building or works anywhere else. First, policy is not a shield for power. It is the instrument by which power protects people. Second, culture is a series of daily choices, not a paragraph in a handbook. Her voice does not rise. She thanks the colleagues who chose to be specific when it mattered. She sits. It feels less like a reveal than a receipt. Ava closes with standards written as verbs: document, verify, escalate, intervene, protect. She says these are not slogans, they are habits. They begin tonight. She invites questions now and later and makes one promise that is both small and enormous. When you do the right thing and the room goes quiet, the company will speak for you. She thanks everyone and does not dismiss them with applause. She dismisses them with work. Outside, people move with the efficient hush of a team that has traded drama for direction. Some offer Maya a nod that is not about her last name. It is about the way she filled a folder with facts. Jenna leans in and whispers a single word that carries the shape of a laugh without breaking the room. Finally, Luis passes with a stack of forms and the neutral stride of someone who knows the next steps as well as the last ones. The interim leader is already answering a question about the approvals grid while walking toward finance. Maya lingers at the back of the boardroom. The table is just a table again. The spot where the mug once tipped is clean. She looks at the camera light and then at the conduct sheet. Two objects that never had emotions and did not need them. She thinks of the first minute of the first scene and the way the room waited to see whether a joke would be required of them. Today, another kind of waiting ended. In the hall, a maintenance cart rattles by with a new box of laminated sheets. Standards printed, ready for break rooms, printer corners, the back of doors. Small rectangles that will be hard to ignore. Maya texts her mother 2 lines. Said plainly. Work continues. The reply comes back and is exactly what she expects. Inside policy, always. She smiles because the phrase has become a compass more than an instruction. She takes the elevator down with strangers from other floors who talk about traffic and dinner and whether the rain will hold. Ordinary is not an insult. It is a goal. On the street, the air is clean and the city sounds like it should sound at the end of a long day. She walks with an even pace, the kind you can keep. Tomorrow there will be follow-ups, audits to close, training to schedule, teams to steady. There will also be the room, the table, the camera, the sheet, and the habit of saying, "Show me" whenever trust asks to skip a step. That is the work. That is the ending worth having.